and Meredith. Hey, congratulations for Pinball, the man who saved the game. I do have to admit, this is one fascinating, entertaining film that you guys made.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you.
So, let's start with this. How did you guys uh, come across the story in the first place?
Um, we don't actually remember when we first heard about Roger Sharpe and how he helped overturn the ban on pinball in New York City in 1976. We have a Google Doc full of embryonic ideas that we occasionally throw random factoids in, and we'll dive in when we're, looking for a project. Um, so we're not entirely sure where we first heard about it, but the first time we thought that it might be a movie is when I cold emailed Roger, and I ended up getting on the phone with him, and for about 3 hours we chatted. At the end of that call, I contacted Austin. I said, I think this might be a feature, because he had told us about everything else that was happening in his life, not just about the shot. That is a pretty well-known thing in pinball circles. And I should say, we are not pinball people. We did not come at this as pinball people, but I knew the story because I had done a little bit of research. But he ended up telling us about everything else, about GQ, about meeting this single mother, about writing this book that was the first book on pinball, and meeting all the creators of the game. These two were, he says, as old as his grandparents at the time. And just how he fell in love with this book, fell in love with this culture, the pinball people, the pinball culture, and the industry. And that ended up giving us an avenue to talk about risk that was more universal, an avenue to talk about, what it's like to take a shot at something, whether and to commit to something, whether if it's going to work out or not. So it became more universal to us. So we could create something that pinball people would hopefully enjoy and be able to embrace, but that people who weren't into pinball could also watch and have a good time.
Wow. So the interview process of putting Roger Sharpe in a dark room and asking all these questions, that never happened.
It was mostly over Zoom. It was February of 2020 when I think you first reached out. So this was the pandemic project, mostly sitting in our basements on Zoom, talking to Roger for an extended period of time. I think cumulatively we spent days talking to Roger as we sort of, took all those elements from his life and fashioned it into a script. So in a way, kind of, but I think he was at his kitchen table.
Well, that's terrific to know. I was fascinated with this pinball history because this pinball culture and so on. I've only knew about the band after watching a film called Licorice Pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just start to go into Wikipedia stories at 3 a.m. or something like that. How did you guys basically try to formulate the story to build upon with Roger Sharpe?
I mean, most of it comes straight from Roger, right? His story. All of the history was just time spent doing research, digging into old archives, looking at old newspapers, trying to find what we could about specifically LaGuardia and the band that was going on in New York, because that was going to be the subject. But these bands were all over the country, and there are still some in place today. In fact, we recently had a screening in Columbia, South Carolina, because there's still a ban on the books for minors playing pinball in South Carolina. We met with the minority leader, Todd Rutherford. He's trying to repeal that ban. The folks at Bang Back Pinball put on a really good event for us, so we all got to watch the movie and then play a lot of pinball. And watch Roger. He was there with us. Watch Roger do his thing. But I mean, these bands, I think, was it Oakland? I think within the last decade repealed their ban. I mean, just because it's not enforced doesn't mean that they're not still on the books. And every now and then you run into a situation where someone wants to open a barcade, and somebody else in the neighborhood decides that they don't want a barcade, so they dig up these old laws and sort of weaponize them. There's a long history there. It was a very different game back in the 30s when most of these bands cropped up, but there's definite moral panic equivalencies today. Anytime you've got young people spending money on something that we don't think is a good idea, we can wave the hammer. And for LaGuardia, it was definitely a PR thing too. He had run on trying to bring down the mob, and this was seen as having mob ties. And so anytime he had to smash a machine, he made sure that all the press were there to take his picture. And there are some great photos out there of LaGuardia smashing pinball machines.
Absolutely. So how much of this story has been fictionalized for you guys for narrative purposes?
Surprisingly little. The greatest liberty we took, I think, is just compressing the timeline. What in our film takes about 18 months took more like 5 years or so, 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, but so many of the things that we drew on are straight from Roger's story.
Yeah, I would say 90% of it is factually accurate as far as what Roger told us, whether it's GQ, the characters at GQ, some of the lines of dialogue that come out of people's mouths are from, Roger, or for, at one point he goes to Chicago to interview for his book some of the people behind the game that created the game. And luckily he still had the cassette tapes from that time. So we, some of the lines out of these people's mouths are lines that these people said, are things that they said to Roger, and we had the cassette tapes. But yeah, and even the times that we do play around with the history a bit, we let the audience know when we did.
Now it was also fascinating that you guys put a love interest for Roger into this story. Was that I want to say, was that at Roger's insistence, or you guys just decided to?
No, it's one of the things he told me on that first call that I loved. I mean, because it gave us an opening to tell a different story, a deeper story. It gave us a B plot that I think most people can understand. This idea of, taking a risk on a commitment on a relationship, and it dovetailed nicely with this idea of risk and what people are allowed to do with pinball, and him taking his shot, and he's gonna do this in front of people and see what happens, and hopefully it works out. It fit really nicely. And I think I don't think when we first got into this, we knew how much of a love story sort of this would end up becoming. But as we got deeper, it was the thing we kept gravitating towards. It was just so rich, and there were so many great moments. And again, 99% of that is true. I mean, how they met in the elevator, her giving him the card, the pre-date, and what she said at the opening, and some of the back and forth that the sort of inside jokes they have, that's from Roger. The relationship with Ellen's son, and how that blossomed, and getting deciding to go to a father-son bowling tournament. I mean, this is stuff. It feels like we made it up, but we didn't. This is stuff they gave us. In so many respects, this felt like a documentary, because Roger gave us so much information that rather than in most fictional narratives, you're building something up. This felt like we had so much information, we were paring it down so we could just find what the story is amongst all of these other side stories. It was pretty great.
That's amazing. Roger is a fascinating storyteller, then.
Yes, he is. He is.
He is.
Yeah. And so is Ellen and Seth, and James. We talked to a bunch of people because, again, it was our COVID project, so we had a lot of time. People were home. They were, I think, eager to open Zoom and have conversations with folks outside their house. We ended up being able to talk to a lot of people that Roger's associated with, around that time, and not just Roger himself.
Wow. How did you guys proceeded to create this as a period piece? I mean, your production designer probably went into great lengths. I don't even know how you managed to pull this off during the pandemic. No.
Yeah, it's funny when MPI first approached us about a feature, and they had produced our short film, A Piece of Cake, and they came to us about any potential feature ideas, and they said specifically no period pieces and no biopics. But we were crazy enough to put that on our short list of pitches to them, and that's the one they gravitated towards. It's not easy, and obviously we lean into the fact that we're making a movie, right? And that it's, not everything is going to be exactly exact. And, this is probably the cleanest New York 70s picture you'll see, probably the most G-rated adult bookstore ever to grace the screen. But we wanted to get that feeling right. We had a lot of conversations early on with production design and costumes, about DP, about color, and how we wanted those softer powdery blues to permeate through. And we did our best to get the look and feel, knowing full well that this wasn't a documentary.
And I would say we actually had some help there with Roger's book. So Roger's book is filled with amazing pictures from James Hamilton, and you go through there and you'll see what an arcade looked like in 1975 or 76. You have, and we borrowed things from that book. There's one scene in particular, the guy, we did a New Jersey arcade, and you see someone walking through with a patch on their back that says change. And that's from the book. That's just something that our costume designer found, Annie Simon, who was terrific. So we leaned into that too, and that we had a couple copies of Roger's book floating around for the production designer, for the costume department, and then just some people just got really into the story. I know we had someone on the camera department bought a book and had everyone sign it because they were smart. I didn't have everyone sign our book. We should have, but yeah, that was helpful.
So there's so many Easter eggs that you guys actually put into a film like this. That is terrific. Well, one major thing I want to touch upon is your lead actor, Mike. Tell us about how you discovered him to play the part, and how did you direct him to? Is it Roger's mannerism and the way he talked? Did he capture that essence exactly?
Yeah, Mike Feist was just phenomenal. He was suggested to us by our excellent casting director, Lindsay Weissmuller. And we looked at his materials. I knew of Dear Evan Hansen, but I never actually saw it on Broadway. West Side Story had been shot, but it hadn't been released. I think we caught just that perfect window. And it turns out we sent him the script and he read it on the plane from New York to LA for a private screening of West Side. And thankfully he liked the script, and we talked to him a little over Zoom, and we connected with him pretty quickly, and it wasn't long before he just sort of said, you know what, let's do it. And he wasn't in a great spot. Like, he wasn't sure if he wanted to even continue acting anymore at that point. And thankfully he took a chance on us.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a funny story, because West Side hadn't come out yet, and we hadn't seen it. But he had been practicing this Midwest accent, and he had spent some time with Roger in Chicago and trying to get some of his mannerisms. And he's not a sort of a method actor by any stretch, but he didn't want to lose the accent, so he tended to speak in that cadence, and it's not too heavy. Sort of, I got used to it. And then after we wrapped, and I think we were in editing, and I saw a behind the scenes interview with Mike from West Side, and he has the thick New York accent. He's got that accent on from West Side. And I was like, I think I'd like as if my respect for him couldn't have gone higher. I was like, good God. Like he had so become that, like, that accent had become so much a part of him that to see him not have it was really strange to me. But he had also obviously done the same thing on West Side, and he had infused this New York accent for that period. And yeah, it's he's great. He's amazing. And Crystal and Dennis and the whole cast were really lovely people and wonderful to work with.
Most excellent. And I just want to end our conversation with to talk about one last character, the mustache. How was that a character in this film?
If you've ever seen photos of, especially the sort of famous photo, or famous in pinball circles photo, of Roger playing in the city council chambers with scowling city council members watching as he proves that it's a game of skill and not chance, you can't help but notice this magnificent mustache.
It's crazy. It's crazy and glorious, and
yes,
no man could, no one can rival Roger in the mustache department.
So we knew we had to have it in there. We knew that the mustache had to be there, and we knew, and at one point we actually had on the script, we did a mustache pass, because it's easy when you're writing it and it's just words to forget that there's going to be this thing on the actor's face, and we want to be able to make sure that we keep talking about it because it's there. Like, it feels like it has to be discussed occasionally. And so we did a pass and made sure that occasionally we would let everyone know, yes, everyone understands that this mustache is a little much. We get it. But that's why we show the picture at the end. At the end of the film, we show the actual picture because we wanted to prove to people this wasn't just a fun device on our end. This was Roger, and it's
part of his brand.
It's iconic to Roger. Yeah, glasses and a mustache. That's Roger Sharpe.
Well, it is quite a character itself, and you guys did a wonderful movie with this pinball movie. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking to us about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.